The studio lights were bright, but the mood felt calm at first, almost too calm for a conversation that had been promoted all week as a serious talk about faith and values. Viewers expected polite words, soft smiles, and a clean ending that would fade into the next show without much thought. On one side of the table sat a well-known preacher, relaxed, confident, and used to speaking in front of cameras, wearing a light-colored suit that reflected the studio glow. On the other side sat Senator John Kennedy, quieter, less polished, dressed in a dark blue jacket, his posture steady, his tone measured, holding a small, worn Bible that looked older than the room itself. The moderator opened the discussion with simple questions about belief, success, and public influence, and at first everything went as expected. The preacher spoke smoothly about hope, positive thinking, and living with confidence, ideas many viewers had heard before and found comforting. His voice was calm, practiced, and steady, and the audience responded with nods and polite smiles. When Kennedy spoke, he did not challenge directly. He shared small stories, talked about how he was raised, and asked gentle questions about what faith looks like when life becomes hard instead of easy. There was no anger in his voice, no attempt to win points. That contrast slowly began to change the room. The audience leaned in a little more. The moderator spoke less. The preacher kept smiling, but the questions began to feel heavier, not because they were sharp, but because they were quiet. Kennedy asked what happens when belief is tied too closely to comfort and whether success can sometimes make people forget those who are struggling. The preacher responded with calm confidence, saying faith lifts people and gives them strength, even in difficult times. Everything still sounded respectful, but something underneath had shifted. The conversation was no longer about ideas alone. It was about tone, about humility, about how power speaks when it feels questioned. Then came the moment people would replay later, not because it was loud, but because it broke the calm. During a tense exchange, the preacher made a dismissive remark, telling the senator to sit down and suggesting he was out of his depth. The words were not shouted, but they landed hard. The room went quiet. The moderator hesitated. The audience stopped moving. It was the kind of silence that feels heavier than noise, because everyone sensed that something important had just changed. This was no longer a friendly talk. It was now about respect. Kennedy did not react the way many expected. He did not raise his voice. He did not return the remark. He simply looked down for a moment, his hand resting on the Bible, then looked back up, calm and steady, as if he had been given time rather than taken by surprise. That calm response shifted the power in the room more than any sharp reply could have. The cameras stayed close, catching small details, the stillness, the change in breathing, the way the audience waited. Kennedy spoke slowly, choosing simple words, saying that faith should never be used to lift one person above another, and that leadership means serving, not standing taller. He did not accuse. He did not judge. He spoke as if he was reminding, not arguing. The Bible in his hands became a symbol, not a weapon, and when he referenced a verse about humility and the danger of chasing wealth, he did so without drama, without anger, just reading it plainly and letting it sit in the air. The room did not react right away. There was no cheering. There was no applause. There was only attention, the kind that feels rare on television. The preacher responded by saying the verse could be read in many ways and that his message was about encouragement, not judgment. Kennedy nodded, agreeing that encouragement matters, but added that encouragement without honesty can become empty. He spoke about people who pray not for success, but for safety, for food, for a place to sleep, and how faith must speak to them too. His voice stayed even. The preacher shifted in his seat, his smile returning but thinner now, and the moderator glanced at the clock, unsure how to move the conversation forward. The audience could feel that the moment had already happened. Nothing louder was needed. What mattered had been said, not through force, but through calm conviction, and viewers at home felt it too, because it felt real, not scripted, not designed for applause, but for reflection. When the segment ended, there was no dramatic sign-off, no clear winner announced, and that was part of why the moment stayed with people. Clips began spreading online, not because someone had been attacked, but because something honest had been shown. People shared it saying it made them uncomfortable in a good way, that it made them think about how power speaks and how silence can sometimes speak louder. Some focused on the remark that started the tension, others on the response that followed, but most focused on the feeling that respect matters, especially in public spaces where millions are watching. The conversation online did not stay on one person or one moment. It widened into questions about leadership, faith, and how public figures handle being questioned. Some viewers defended the preacher, saying his message had helped them through hard times. Others said the senator's calm response reminded them of the values they were taught growing up. What made the moment last was not outrage, but reflection. The senator did not go on a media tour afterward. He did not claim victory. When asked about it later, he simply said that faith speaks best when it is lived, not performed. The preacher returned to his work as well, continuing to speak to his audience, but the clip had already taken on a life of its own. It became less about two men and more about a shared feeling that something important had been shown on live television without shouting or spectacle. Teachers discussed it in classrooms as an example of calm debate. Families talked about it at dinner tables, not arguing, but asking what humility really looks like. Even people who were not religious said the moment felt human, because it showed how quickly respect can slip, and how powerful it is when someone chooses not to strike back. In a media world filled with noise, this moment stood out because it slowed everything down. It reminded viewers that strength does not always come from control, that leadership does not need sharp words, and that sometimes the most lasting moments are the quiet ones. The story stayed with people because it did not tell them what to think. It showed them how tone, patience, and restraint can change the direction of a room. Long after the lights dimmed and the show ended, the image that remained was simple: one man speaking smoothly, another listening carefully, and a reminder that true influence is not measured by volume or status, but by the weight of words chosen with care.